12 species had sent their representatives to Concord Station, and not one of them trusted the humans. Ambassador Riel of the Telvanni stood at the center of the circular chamber, her crystalline skin catching the light as she moved. She had spent 40 years questioning soldiers, diplomats, and criminals. She knew how to break someone with words alone. Today, her target sat in a simple chair at the center of the room, wearing a dress uniform covered in medals he clearly wished he could remove. Gunnery Sergeant David Okonkwo was not what she expected. Human military propaganda showed screaming warriors charging into battle. This man sat quietly, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes watching everything and everyone. He was 42 years old, according to his file. His face carried scars that medical technology could have erased, but he had chosen to keep them. The chamber held representatives from every major species in the Galactic Assembly. The Dreckery sent Fleet Commander Hosk, a reptilian officer whose scales were decorated with battle honors. The Kalori sent a small delegation led by Delegate Sin, whose 4 eyes blinked in constant rotation. Others filled the remaining seats, all of them curious about the violent species that had stumbled into galactic society just 30 years ago. Riel began with standard questions: training duration, equipment specifications, command structure. Okonkwo answered each one clearly and without emotion. His voice was deep and calm, the voice of a man who had long ago learned to control every part of himself. Fleet Commander Hosk grew impatient. His people valued directness above all else. "Enough of this," he growled. "We know humans can fight. We have seen the recordings from your border conflicts. What we want to know is whether you fight with honor or simply with savagery." "Define honor," Okonkwo said. The chamber stirred. No one spoke to a Dreckery fleet commander that way. Hosk's eyes narrowed. "Honor is victory achieved through superior skill and courage. Honor is defeating your enemies so completely that they never rise again." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "We have a different definition." Before Hosk could respond, Riel raised her hand. She had conducted thousands of interviews, and she recognized something in the human's eyes. There was a story there, buried deep beneath that calm surface. She intended to drag it into the light. "Sergeant Okonkwo," she said, "I have reviewed your service record. 23 years of continuous military service. 14 major combats déploiement. You have received your species' highest honors for valor multiple times." She paused, letting the information settle over the chamber. "Clearly, you are considered an exceptional warrior by human standards." "I'm a Marine," Okonkwo said. "Warriors seek glory. Marines do a job." An interesting distinction. Riel moved closer, her crystalline form casting rainbow shadows across the floor. "Tell me, Sergeant, in your 23 years of service across 14 combat deployments, what is your personal kill count?" The question hung in the air. Okonkwo did not answer. Seconds passed. The chamber grew restless. Hosk shifted in his seat, his claws tapping against the armrest. Delegate Sin's 4 eyes all focused on the human with sudden intensity. Even Riel felt a flicker of uncertainty. She had expected a boast, a deflection, or perhaps an admission of shame. She had not expected silence. "Sergeant," she prompted. Okonkwo's eyes met hers. For a moment, Riel saw something that made her ancient heart skip. It was not anger. It was not pride. It was something she had never seen in a soldier before. It was grief. "Ambassador," Okonkwo said quietly, "do you want to know how many enemies I have killed? Or do you want to know how many people I have failed to save?" The chamber fell completely silent. "I do not understand the distinction," Riel admitted. Okonkwo leaned forward slightly. His voice remained calm, but there was weight behind every word. "When I close my eyes at night, I do not see the enemies I killed. I see Private Williams, who was 19 years old when a sniper round took her through the throat. I see Corporal Diaz, who bled out of my arms because the medevac was 4 minutes too late. I see a little girl named Sarah, who I carried out of a burning building, who died in the hospital 3 days later because the smoke had already destroyed her lungs." He paused. The chamber remained frozen. "I see the village elder who trusted me when I promised my unit would protect his people. I see his body in the rubble after the enemy bombed the shelter we told them was safe. I see 63 faces, Ambassador. The ones I cannot save. Those are the numbers that keep me awake. Hosk broke the silence with a snort. This is weakness. A true warrior does not mourn fallen enemies or failed missions. He celebrates victories and learns from defeats. With respect, Fleet Commander Okonkwo said, I did not mention fallen enemies. I mentioned fallen friends and innocent people who died under my protection. And the enemies? Riel asked, do you not remember them? Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I remember every single one. 47 confirmed kills. I remember their faces. I remember the moments they died. I carry them too, Ambassador. Not as trophies, as weights. The silence that followed was unlike anything the Galactic Assembly had ever experienced. Riel felt something shift inside her. In 4 decades of questioning soldiers from a dozen species, she had never heard anyone speak of killing with such obvious pain. She had never met a warrior who counted his dead enemies as burdens rather than achievements. She accessed her personal database and pulled up a classified file. Her eyes widened slightly as she read its contents. Sergeant Okonkwo, she said slowly, you served in the Proxima incident 3 years ago. Is that correct? For the first time, something flickered across Okonkwo's face. It might have been fear. It might have been sorrow. It disappeared before Riel could identify it. Yes, Ambassador, he said. I did. Then I believe this assembly needs to hear what happened there. The name Proxima sent a ripple through the chamber. Several delegates leaned forward. Others exchanged glances with their aides. Even Hosk, who had been dismissive moments ago, straightened in his seat with new interest. Riel watched Okonkwo carefully. The human's face had become a mask, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightening around his eyes. Whatever happened at Proxima, it still haunted him. The Proxima incident has been classified by multiple governments, Riel continued. However, this assembly has the authority to discuss any matter relevant to galactic security. And I believe what happened there is very relevant to our evaluation of humanity. Ambassador Mira Santos spoke up from the human delegation section. That incident is still under investigation by our military courts. Sergeant Okonkwo may not be legally permitted to discuss certain details. Then he may decline to answer specific questions, Riel said. But I suspect he will not. She was right. Okonkwo looked at Mira and gave a small shake of his head. Then he turned back to face the assembly. What do you want to know? He asked. Riel pulled up her data files for everyone to see. Holographic images appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a small human colony on a rocky moon. Proxima colony. Population 12,000 humans. Additionally, 43 Telvanni observers were stationed there studying human agricultural techniques. She paused. 3 years ago, Raxian raiders attacked the colony. They sought slaves and resources. Within 6 hours, colony defenses had collapsed. A distress signal was sent. I know this part, Hosk interrupted. The nearest human military force was a small patrol ship, but they were ordered to wait for reinforcements. Standard protocol for an overwhelming enemy force. Correct, Riel said. Reinforcements were 18 hours away. Protocol dictated that the patrol ship maintain distance and observe until support arrived. She turned to Okonkwo. But that is not what happened. Is it, Sergeant? Okonkwo's jaw tightened. No, Ambassador. That is not what happened. Tell us. The chamber waited. Okonkwo was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of memory. I was the senior enlisted Marine on that patrol ship. We had 11 combat personnel total. When the distress call came in, we could hear the screaming. Raxian raiders do not simply kill. They enjoy causing pain. They were broadcasting their attack as entertainment for their fleet. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Raxians were known throughout the galaxy for their cruelty. Our commanding officer followed protocol. Okonkwo continued. He ordered us to maintain position and await reinforcements. He was correct to do so. 11 Marines against an estimated 300 raiders is not a battle. It is a suicide. Yet you disobeyed, Riel said. I made a request first. I asked permission to attempt a rescue. I was denied. I asked again. I was denied again. Then I asked the other Marines if they would follow me, knowing they would likely die. Okonkwo's voice remained steady, but his hands had curled into fists. All 10 of them said yes. Hosk leaned forward, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by genuine interest. You led a mutiny? I led a rescue mission without authorization. The legal distinction is complicated, but the result is the same. We took a drop pod and launched directly into the colony. We landed in the Central District, where the main civilian shelter was located. The raiders had not yet breached it, but they were trying. 11 Marines against 300 raiders, Delegate Sen said, his voice carrying an odd mixture of horror and fascination. How could you possibly hope to succeed? We did not hope to succeed, Okonkwo said. We hoped to hold them long enough for reinforcements to arrive. 18 hours. That was our mission. Survive for 18 hours. The chamber fell silent again. Riel could see delegates doing the mental calculations. 18 hours of continuous combat against 30-to-1 odds was not a battle plan. It was a death sentence willingly accepted. We set up defensive positions around the shelter, Okonkwo continued. We used every piece of cover, every choke point, every advantage the terrain offered. The colony's emergency supplies gave us ammunition and medical equipment. We rationed everything. 3 bullets per raider, 1 medical kit per Marine. No room for waste. And then, Riel prompted, and then we fought. His words were simple, but Riel could hear the universe of pain behind them. Private Anna Reyes was 20 years old. She had been in my unit for 11 months. During the 4th hour of the siege, she took a plasma bolt through her abdomen. The wound should have killed her instantly. Instead, she propped herself against a door frame and held that choke point alone for the next 4 hours. She killed 31 raiders before she finally fell. She was still pulling the trigger when her heart stopped. Nobody in the chamber moved. Corporal James Obi lost his left arm to a raider's blade during hour 6. He cauterized the wound himself, picked up his rifle with his remaining hand, and continued fighting. During hour 9, he carried 3 wounded Telvanni observers to the shelter on his back, one at a time, while under heavy fire. He saved all 3. Okonkwo's voice cracked slightly. He paused, took a breath, and continued. Sergeant First Class Maria Torres held the eastern approach with 2 other Marines. When they ran out of ammunition during hour 12, she ordered the others to fall back while she charged the raider position with her combat knife. She killed 4 of them before they brought her down. Her sacrifice gave the others time to reach a resupply point. Riel noticed that the chamber had become absolutely still. Every being present was listening with complete attention. By hour 16, there were 4 of us left. For Marines, holding 4 positions around a shelter containing over 8,000 civilians and 43 Telvanni observers. We had almost no ammunition remaining. We had no medical supplies. We had nothing left except our bodies and our will to fight. He looked up at the assembly, and Riel saw tears in his eyes. When reinforcements finally arrived 2 hours later, the raiders had been forced back 3 times. They had lost over 200 fighters. We had lost 7 Marines. 7 of the finest soldiers I have ever known. 7 friends who followed me into hell because I asked them to. You saved 8,000 people, Riel said softly. 8,343, Okonkwo corrected. I remember the exact number. I remember it because it is the only thing that makes the other number bearable. What other number? Hosk asked. 47 confirmed kills during the siege, plus 7 Marines who died because I asked them to follow me, plus the 63 I could not save throughout my career. Okonkwo's voice broke completely. That is the weight I carry, Fleet Commander. That is what humans carry. Every life we take, every life we fail to save. We do not forget. We do not move on. We carry them until we die. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Riel found herself unable to speak. In all her years, she had never witnessed anything like this. A warrior weeping openly for his fallen enemies and friends alike. A soldier who counted his kills as wounds upon his own soul. Finally, she found her voice. Sergeant Okonkwo, the Telvanni observers who survived that siege, sent a report to my government. That report was sealed and classified at the highest level. I have never been permitted to read it. She paused. I would like you to tell me what they saw. Okonkwo wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. When he spoke again, his voice was raw but steady. I do not know what they wrote, Ambassador, but I know what they told me afterward, and I will never forget it. The holographic display in the center of the chamber flickered and new images appeared. Proxima colony before the attack. A small but thriving settlement built into the rocky terrain of a barren moon. Agricultural domes glowed green against the gray landscape. Children played in enclosed courtyards. It looked peaceful. Okonkwo stared at the images with the expression of a man revisiting a nightmare. The Telvanni observers were stationed in the Agricultural Research Center, he said. They had been there for 6 months, studying how humans could grow food in hostile environments. Our people worked alongside them every day. We shared meals. We shared stories. They were not soldiers. They were scientists and researchers. Riel nodded slowly. The Telvanni were not a warrior species. They valued knowledge above all else, and their people rarely ventured into dangerous regions of space. The fact that 43 of them had chosen to live among humans said something important about how they viewed the young species. When the attack began, the Telvanni were among the first to reach the central shelter. Okonkwo continued. They understood immediately that they could not fight. Their bodies are fragile compared to most species. A single blow from a Raxian could kill them. So they did what they could. They helped organize the civilians. They treated wounded with their medical knowledge. They kept people calm when the walls shook from explosions. They recorded everything, Riel said quietly. Telvanni always record everything. I know. I saw them watching us. During the worst moments of the fighting, when we were certain we would die, they watched and recorded. At first, I thought they were being cold, detached. I did not understand. What did you understand later? Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. They were bearing witness. In Telvanni culture, when something important happens, someone must remember it. Someone must carry the truth forward. They knew they might survive when we would not. So they made sure our story would not be lost. The chamber stirred. Riel felt a strange pride in her people, mixed with a growing respect for the humans who had protected them. Tell us about the final hours, she said. Okonkwo closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he seemed to be looking at something far away. Hour 14. We had 6 Marines left. The raiders had breached the outer perimeter and were pushing toward the shelter from 3 directions. Private Reyes was dead. Sergeant Torres was dead. Corporal Obi was still fighting with one arm, bleeding from a dozen wounds that should have killed him. He paused, gathering himself. I held the main entrance. It was the widest approach, the most dangerous position. The raiders knew that if they could break through there, they could reach the civilians. So they sent wave after wave against us. Against me. You alone. By hour 15, yes. The other Marines were holding secondary positions. I was the only one at the main entrance. His voice hardened. I killed 17 raiders in that hour. 17 beings who were trying to break through a door to reach 8,000 innocent people. I killed them with my rifle until the ammunition ran out. I killed them with my pistol until that ran out too. Then I killed them with my knife. Hosk leaned forward, his reptilian eyes gleaming with something that might have been respect. Hand-to-hand combat against Raxians? They are nearly twice human size. Yes, they are also arrogant. They did not expect a human to fight them with a blade. The first one laughed when I drew my knife. He stopped laughing when I cut his throat. Okonkwo's voice was flat, emotionless. The second one was more careful. He lasted 8 seconds. The third one tried to use his size advantage. I took his legs out from under him and finished him on the ground. How many did you kill with a knife? Delegate Sin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 7. Then reinforcements arrived. Human reinforcements. They came through the colony like a storm, and the surviving raiders fled. Okonkwo shuddered slightly. I remember falling to my knees when I heard human voices. I remember thinking that it was over. that we had held long enough. You saved them all, Riel said. The civilians, the Telvanni, all of them. We lost 7 Marines. We lost over 400 civilians who died in the initial attack before we could establish our defensive position. We lost 1 Telvanni observer who refused to leave a wounded human child and was killed by a raider grenade. Okonkwo's voice cracked. Her name was Gentle Voice of Evening. She was 93 years old. She had never held a weapon in her life. She died shielding a 6-year-old boy with her body. The chamber fell silent. Riel felt tears forming in her crystalline eyes. She had not known about Gentle Voice of Evening. That detail had been left out of every report she had read. The boy survived, Okonkwo said quietly. His name is Michael. He is 9 years old now. He sent me a letter every year on the anniversary of the siege. He tells me about his school, his friends, his dreams. He always ends the same way. He thanks me for saving his life. He thanks Gentle Voice of Evening for saving his life. He promises to be worthy of the sacrifices that were made for him. Riel wiped her eyes. Around the chamber, other delegates were showing similar signs of emotion. Even Hosk's rigid posture had softened. After the battle ended, Okonkwo continued. One of the Telvanni observers approached me. Her name was Crystalline Voice of Morning. She was the eldest among them, over 200 years old. She had watched everything, recorded everything, witnessed everything. What did she say? Riel asked. She touched my face with her hand. Her skin was cold like glass, but somehow also warm. She looked into my eyes, and I saw something I did not expect. I saw grief. She was grieving for me, for what I had done, for what I had been forced to become. Okonkwo's voice dropped almost to a whisper. She said, "You carry death so that others may carry life. This is not violence. This is love wearing armor." The words hung in the air like a prayer. I did not understand at first, Okonkwo admitted. I thought she was trying to comfort me, to make me feel better about the blood on my hands. But later, I realized she was describing something much deeper. She was describing what humans are. What are humans? Riel asked. Okonkwo looked up at the assembly. His eyes moved from face to face, species to species, studying the beings who would decide humanity's future. Humans are not warriors who love battle. We are guardians who hate the necessity of violence but accept it anyway. We do not fight for glory or conquest. We fight because someone must stand between the darkness and those who cannot defend themselves. We carry the weight of every life we take, and we carry the grief of every life we lose. That weight never gets lighter. We simply learn to bear it. Haas stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. The Dreckery fleet commander reached up and removed his rank insignia. He placed it on the table before him with a soft click. In my culture, he said slowly, when we encounter a warrior who surpasses all our expectations, we acknowledge them with the removal of rank. Rank is earned through victory. What you have described is something beyond victory. It is something my people do not have a word for. He looked at Okonkwo with new eyes. Tell me, human, why would your species die for strangers? Why would you carry such terrible burdens for people you have never met and will never know? My people fight for honor, for territory, for dominance. What do humans fight for? Okonkwo met his gaze without flinching. We fight for tomorrow, fleet commander. We fight so that children like Michael can grow up. We fight so that scientists like Gentle Voice of Evening can pursue knowledge without fear. We fight because every life has value, and some things are worth more than our own survival. Hosk was silent for a long moment. I have fought for 200 years, he finally said. I have never met a species that thinks as you do. I'm not certain whether to admire you or fear you. Okonkwo smiled sadly. Most humans feel both, fleet commander. We admire what we could be. We fear what we are capable of becoming. Mira Santos watched the exchange between Hosk and Okonkwo with growing amazement. She had served as a diplomatic attaché for 8 years, and she had never seen a Dreckery remove his rank insignia for anyone. The gesture meant more than respect. It meant acknowledgement of superiority in some fundamental way. The chamber buzzed with whispered conversations. Delegates conferred with their aides. Data pads flickered as species representatives accessed their own military records, searching for anything comparable to what they had just heard. Riel raised her hand for silence. The chamber quieted immediately. Sergeant Okonkwo, she said, I want to return to something you said earlier. You mentioned that humans carry every death as a weight. I have questioned soldiers from 11 different species. I have never heard anyone describe killing in such terms. Most warriors view their kills as achievements, proof of skill, evidence of worth. I understand, Okonkwo said. Before humanity encountered other species, we often thought the same way. We had medals for confirmed kills. We had rankings based on combat effectiveness. We celebrated our deadliest soldiers as heroes. What changed? Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. We met ourselves in the mirror. The phrase confused the assembly. Riel tilted her head. Explain. When humans began exploring space, we found something we did not expect. We found the ruins of civilizations that had destroyed themselves. World after world, species after species, all gone. They had developed technology. They had built empires. And then they had turned their weapons on each other until nothing remained. The chamber stirred uncomfortably. Several species had similar histories, periods of self-destruction that they rarely discussed with outsiders. We realized that glorifying death was a path to extinction. Okonkwo continued. We cannot stop fighting entirely. The universe is dangerous, and sometimes violence is necessary to protect the innocent. But we could change how we thought about it. We could teach our soldiers to carry the weight of every life they took. We could make killing something that wounded the killer as much as the victim. That seems counterproductive, Delegate Sen said. A soldier who hesitates out of guilt is a dead soldier. No, Okonkwo said firmly. A soldier who hesitates out of guilt is a soldier who has not been properly trained. We do not hesitate. We act decisively when action is required. But afterward, we feel the weight. We process the reality of what we have done. We remind ourselves that every enemy was someone's child, someone's friend, someone's hope for the future. He leaned forward, his voice intense. This does not make us weaker. It makes us careful. It makes us question whether violence is truly necessary before we commit to it. It makes us search for every possible alternative before we take a life. And when we do take lives, we do so with full awareness of what we are doing. We are not mindless killers. We are guardians who understand the cost of guardianship. Riel considered this. It was a philosophy unlike anything she had encountered in her decades of diplomatic work. Most species either embraced violence wholeheartedly or rejected it entirely. Humans seem to have found a middle path, one that acknowledged the necessity of force while refusing to celebrate it. I would like to hear from your diplomatic representative, Riel said, turning to Mira Santos. Miss Santos, can you explain how this philosophy manifests in human society beyond the military? Mira stood, smoothing her formal robes. She was a small woman, barely reaching the chest of most species in the room, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. The philosophy Sergeant Okonkwo describes is not limited to our military, she said. It permeates our entire culture. We call it the burden of responsibility. She activated her own data pad, and new images appeared in the chamber's holographic display. Scenes from Earth. Firefighters running into a burning building. Doctors treating wounded soldiers on both sides of a battlefield. Aid workers distributing food in a disaster zone. On Earth, there's a profession called firefighting. These are civilians who run toward danger while everyone else runs away. They enter burning buildings to save strangers. Many of them die in the attempt. They're not soldiers. They receive no glory, no medals, no recognition beyond their communities. They do it because someone must. The image is shifted. A hospital in a war zone. Human doctors working on wounded fighters from both sides of the conflict, treating them with equal care. Our medical ethics require doctors to treat all patients equally, regardless of which side they fight for. During our wars, human doctors have saved the lives of enemy soldiers who, once healed, returned to fighting against us. We consider this morally correct. A life is a life. The duty to preserve it does not depend on politics. More images. Soldiers in combat gear, carrying children through rubble. Marines distributing candy to local children in occupied territories. A human officer weeping over the body of an enemy he had been forced to kill. When human soldiers occupy foreign territory, they are trained to protect the civilian population, even at risk to themselves. They are trained to see the enemy's children as children first, enemies second. They are trained to rebuild what they have destroyed, to heal what they have wounded, to carry the cost of their actions for the rest of their lives. Delegate Sin raised a manipulator limb. This seems inefficient. If your soldiers are constantly burdened by guilt and grief, how do they function? They function because they believe in something larger than themselves, Mira said. They function because they know that the weight they carry is the price of being human. To feel nothing when taking a life would be to lose something essential. It would be to become the monsters they fight against. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each delegate in turn. Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the smartest or the most advanced, but we may be the only species that has learned to weaponize compassion. We fight harder because we feel more. We sacrifice more because we value more. We win not by being better killers, but by being better at remembering why killing is sometimes necessary. Hosk spoke again, his voice thoughtful. In my culture, we have a saying, the blade that hesitates is broken. You seem to be telling me that human blades hesitate constantly, yet they do not break. The blade does not hesitate, Okonkwo said. The hand does, and the hesitation happens before the fight, not during it. We question whether to fight at all. Once the decision is made, we fight with everything we have. But we never stop questioning whether it was the right decision. And if it was the wrong decision, Riel asked, then we carry that weight too. We carry the guilt of unnecessary deaths. We carry the shame of preventable suffering. We carry all, Ambassador, because that is what it means to be human. We refuse to be comfortable with violence. We refuse to be numb to death. We choose to feel everything, even when it hurts, because the alternative is to become something we cannot accept. The chamber fell into contemplative silence. Riel found herself deeply moved, though she was not entirely sure why. There was something profound in what these humans were describing, something that resonated with values she had almost forgotten she held. Sergeant Okonkwo, she said finally, I asked you at the beginning of this session what your kill count was. You did not answer with a number. You answered with silence, and then with grief. I think I am beginning to understand why. Okonkwo nodded slowly. The silence was not evasion, Ambassador. It was respect. When you asked me how many lives I have taken, you asked me to remember 47 individual beings, 47 faces, 47 stories that ended because of my actions. I cannot speak their number without first honoring their existence. You honor your enemies? I honor all the dead, friend and enemy alike. They were all alive once. They all had hopes and dreams, and people who loved them. My bullets ended all of that. How could I not honor them? Riel felt something shift in her understanding. This was not weakness. This was not guilt. This was something else entirely. Something she did not have a word for in her own language. It was, she realized, humanity. The debate that followed was unlike anything the Galactic Assembly had witnessed before. Species that had barely spoken to each other for centuries found themselves in passionate discussion. Old assumptions crumbled. New questions emerged. A Kelori delegate named Sin approached the central speaking area. His four eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of deep thought among his people. I must confess something, he said. When humanity first made contact with the galaxy, my species was among those who voted to observe them from a distance. We believed that any species capable of such violence must eventually destroy itself. We were simply waiting for the inevitable. The chamber stirred. It was rare for any species to admit such cold calculations openly. But what I have heard today challenges that assumption, Sen continued. You describe a species that has found a way to contain its violence, to channel it, to feel the weight of it without being crushed. This is not what we expected. What did you expect? Mira Santos asked. We expected monsters wearing the mask of civilization. We expected predators pretending to be partners. We expected that eventually the mask would slip and we would see the true face of humanity. Sen paused. Instead, I see something far more complicated. I see a species that is fully aware of its own darkness and chooses to fight it every single day. Hosk stood again. The Dreckery commander had been uncharacteristically quiet during the discussion, but now he spoke with unusual emotion in his voice. I have a question for the human sergeant, he said. You spoke of carrying the weight of every death. You spoke of honoring your enemies. But tell me this. If you had to do it again, if you could go back to Proxima and make the choice again, knowing that 7 of your Marines would die, knowing that you would carry 47 more souls on your conscience, would you still drop into that colony? The chamber held its breath. Okonkwo did not hesitate. Every time. Why? Haas demanded. Why would you choose to suffer? Why would you choose to carry such terrible burdens when you could simply follow orders and let others bear the responsibility? Because the alternative was unacceptable, Okonkwo said simply. 8,000 people would have been enslaved or killed. 43 Telvanni scientists would have been tortured to death. Children would have watched their parents die. Parents would have watched their children be taken. I could not prevent that suffering without accepting suffering of my own. So I accepted it. But you did not have to, Haas pressed. You had orders. You had protocol. You could have waited, and no one would have blamed you. Your conscience would have been clear. No, Okonkwo said, and his voice carried an edge of steel. My conscience would never have been clear. I would have spent the rest of my life hearing the screams I could have prevented. I would have seen the faces of children I could have saved. The weight of those 8,000 deaths would have been far heavier than the weight of the 47 I carry now. Riel stepped forward. You are saying that inaction would have been worse than action? That failing to save is worse than killing to save. I'm saying that humans cannot ignore suffering. We're not built that way. When we see someone in pain, something inside us demands that we help. When we see injustice, something inside us demands that we fight. We can suppress these instincts. We can rationalize an action, but we cannot escape the knowledge that we chose not to act when we could have. The Kalori delegate Sin nodded slowly. This explains something that has puzzled my people for years. We have observed humans rushing into disasters, volunteering for dangerous missions, sacrificing themselves for strangers. We assumed it was cultural conditioning or religious obligation. You are saying it is something more fundamental. It is who we are, Mira Santos said. We cannot watch suffering without feeling it ourselves. We cannot witness injustice without feeling the urge to correct it. This does not make us saints. It makes us restless. It makes us constantly dissatisfied with the world as it is. It drives us to change things, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. But when it is for better, Riel asked, when it is for better, we move mountains. We cure diseases. We rebuild cities. We protect strangers across the galaxy. We do things that seem impossible because we cannot accept that they are impossible. The chamber fell into thoughtful silence. Riel looked around at the assembled delegates. She could see the shift happening in real time. Species that had viewed humanity with suspicion were beginning to reconsider. Species that had dismissed humans as primitive were recognizing something ancient and powerful in their philosophy. I would like to pose a hypothetical question, Riel said. If humanity were admitted to this assembly, and a member species were attacked by a force too powerful for them to resist alone, what would humanity do? Okonkwo and Mira exchanged glances. It was Okonkwo who answered. We would fight, even if the odds were impossible. Especially if the odds were impossible. That is when fighting matters most. Even if it meant the death of human soldiers. Even if it meant carrying the weight of thousands more souls. Ambassador, Okonkwo said quietly, we have a saying on Earth. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. We do not consider assembly members to be strangers. We consider them to be potential friends. And for friends, we will fight until our last breath. Haas made a sound that might have been a laugh. You are either the bravest species in the galaxy or the most foolish. Perhaps both. Definitely both, Mira Santos said with a small smile. We have never claimed to be wise. We have only claimed to care. Riel felt a decision forming in her mind. She had come to this session expecting to find reasons to reject humanity. She had come prepared to expose the violence and barbarism that surely lurked beneath the surface of human civilization. Instead, she had found something that shook her to her core. She had found a species that had learned to love so deeply that they would carry the weight of death rather than become numb to it. A species that would die for strangers because they could not bear to watch strangers suffer. A species that considered every life precious, including the lives of their enemies. I believe, she said slowly, that this assembly needs to reconsider its assumptions about humanity. The words hung in the air. Around the chamber, delegates began to nod, some reluctantly, some with surprising enthusiasm. Even Hosk, the hardened Drekari warrior, inclined his head in agreement. I would like to call for a vote, Riel continued. But before we vote, I have one final request. She turned to face Okonkwo directly. Sergeant, you have told us what happened at Proxima. You have told us what the Telvanni observer said to you after the battle. But I sense there is something more. Something you have not yet shared. Okonkwo's expression tightened. Ambassador, crystalline voice of mourning. The elder who touched your face and spoke those words about love wearing armor. What happened to her? The silence that followed was heavier than any that had come before. She died, Okonkwo said finally, 3 months after the siege. Natural causes. She was over 200 years old. And before she died, Okonkwo closed his eyes. Before she died, she came to visit me on Earth. She traveled halfway across the galaxy, at her age, just to see me one more time. She said she needed to tell me something. Something she could not put in any report. What did she tell you? When Okonkwo opened his eyes, they were filled with tears. She told me that in 200 years of life, she had never understood what courage truly meant. She had read about it. She had studied it. But she had never felt it. Not until she watched 11 humans choose to die for strangers they had never met. He took a shaky breath. She told me that watching us fight had changed her. It had shown her that love was not just a feeling. It was an action, a choice, a willingness to suffer so that others might be spared. And she thanked me for teaching her that lesson, even though I had never meant to teach anything at all. Riel felt tears forming in her own crystalline eyes. She said one more thing. Okonkwo continued. She said that when she died, she would carry the memory of those 11 Marines with her into whatever came next. She said we had given her something to believe in, something worth dying for. He looked up at the assembly. That is why I fight, Ambassador. Not for glory, not for victory. I fight because somewhere out there, someone needs to believe that help is coming. Someone needs to know that they are not alone. Someone needs to see love wearing armor, standing between them and the darkness. The chamber was utterly silent. Riel wiped her eyes. I think, she said softly, that we are ready to vote. Riel stood at the center of the chamber and raised her hand. The murmuring stopped. Every eye, every sensory organ, every attention-focusing appendage in the room turned toward her. Before we proceed with the vote, she said, I would like to request something unprecedented. I would like this assembly to observe a moment of silence. Confused expressions rippled through the chamber. The Galactic Assembly had protocols for everything, but moments of silence were not among them. Most species dealt with death through elaborate rituals specific to their cultures. A simple silence seemed inadequate, almost primitive. Silence for what purpose? Delegate Sen asked. For the 7 Marines who died at Proxima Colony, Riel said. For Private Anna Reyes, who held a doorway for 4 hours with a mortal wound. For Corporal James Obi, who carried our people to safety with one arm. For Sergeant Maria Torres, who charged into certain death so that others could live. And for the others whose names we have not spoken, but whose sacrifice made this moment possible. The chamber stirred with something that might have been emotion. I also ask that we remember Gentle Voice of Evening, Riel continued. A Telvanni scientist who died shielding a human child. And Crystalline Voice of Morning, who lived long enough to carry the memory of human courage into eternity. She looked around the chamber. Humanity is asking to join our assembly. Before we vote, I believe we should acknowledge the price they have already paid for the privilege of standing among us. Not just at Proxima, but across their entire history. Every war they have fought, every soldier they have lost, every burden they have carried so that strangers might live. Hosk rose to his feet. The Dreckery will observe this silence. One by one, other delegates stood. The Kilori, the Telvanni, species that had been hostile to humanity, species that had been indifferent, species that had barely acknowledged human existence. All of them rose. Riel nodded. Let us remember, the silence that followed was unlike anything the assembly had ever experienced. It was not empty. It was full of the weight of countless deaths, full of the grief of species who were only now beginning to understand what humans carried every day of their lives, full of something that transcended language and culture and biology. It lasted for 60 seconds. When Riel spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Thank you. Now let us vote. The voting process was simple. Each species representative pressed a button on their console. Green for yes, red for no. The results appeared on the central display in real time. Green, green, green. The Dreckery voted first. Green. Hosk remained standing, his eyes fixed on Okonkwo with an expression that bordered on reverence. The Telvanni voted next. Green. Riel allowed herself a small smile. The Kilori. Green. Delegate Sin's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of strong emotion. One by one, every species in the chamber voted. 12 green lights, 0 red. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Assembly, a species had been admitted by unanimous decision. The chamber erupted, not in the cold, formal applause typical of diplomatic functions, but in something warmer, something real. Delegates crossed the chamber to approach the human delegation. Hands were extended. Appendages were offered. Ancient protocols of greeting and respect were exchanged. In the midst of the celebration, Riel made her way to where Okonkwo still sat. He had not moved during the vote. He had not reacted to the unanimous decision. He simply sat there, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes distant. Sergeant Okonkwo, she said gently. He looked up at her. Ambassador, you do not seem pleased. Okonkwo considered the question. I am grateful that humanity has been accepted. I am grateful that my testimony helped. But I'm also remembering the faces of the people who made this moment possible. 7 Marines, 1 Telvanni elder, 47 enemies who died by my hand. They are not here to see this. Riel sat down beside him. It was an informal gesture, one that would have scandalized her aides, but she did not care. I asked you a question at the beginning of this session, she said. I asked what your kill count was. You answered with silence. Now I understand why. Do you? The silence was not because you were ashamed of the number. It was not because you could not remember. The silence was because you were honoring them. All of them. Every soul that weighs upon you. Okonkwo nodded slowly. Every death deserves at least a moment of recognition. Even the deaths I caused. Especially the deaths I caused. Riel reached out and touched his hand. Her crystalline skin was cool against his warm flesh. Sergeant, I have questioned soldiers from 11 species. I have met warriors who boast of thousands of kills. I have met commanders who view casualties as statistics. Never in 40 years have I met anyone who carries death the way you do. Is that good or bad? It is human, Riel said, and I think that might be the most remarkable thing in the galaxy. She stood and offered him her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Okonkwo rose and took it. Welcome to the Galactic Assembly, Riel said. I suspect you are going to change everything. We tend to do that, Okonkwo admitted. We cannot seem to help ourselves. As the celebration continued around them, Riel found herself standing beside Hosk. The Dreckery commander was watching the humans with an expression she had never seen on his reptilian features. What are you thinking? She asked. I am thinking that my people have been warriors for 10,000 years, Hosk said slowly. We have conquered systems. We have defeated species. We have built an empire on the bones of our enemies. And in all that time, we never thought to ask whether our enemies had faces. We never thought to carry their weight. Will you change? Hosk was silent for a long moment. I do not know if we can. The Dreckery way is ancient, but perhaps, with humanity among us, we can learn. Perhaps they can teach us what crystalline voice of morning learned. That love is an action. That courage is a choice. That sometimes the strongest warrior is the one who feels the most. He looked at Riel. Or perhaps they will simply fight beside us, carrying weight we cannot imagine, dying for people they will never meet, and we will watch and wonder at a species that somehow turned weakness into strength. Is feeling the weight of death really strength? Riel asked. Apparently so, Hosk said. I've seen their kill counts. I have heard their stories, and I have watched them weep for their enemies. By every measure I know, they should be broken. They should be paralyzed by guilt and grief. Instead, they are here, standing tall, ready to defend strangers across the galaxy. He shook his massive head. They asked that sergeant his kill count, and his silence said everything. It said that every number is a person. Every statistic is a soul. Every victory is also a tragedy. And somehow, humans have learned to hold all of that at once without being crushed by it. Riel watched as Okonkwo was approached by delegates from a dozen species. Each one offered gestures of respect. Each one seemed to recognize something profound in the scarred human who had wept openly before the entire assembly. What do you think will happen now? She asked. Hosk actually laughed, a rare sound from a Dreckery. Chaos. Confusion. Change. The humans will poke at things that have been settled for millennia. They will question traditions that everyone else accepts. They will throw themselves into danger to save species that would not lift a finger to save them. And slowly, inevitably, they will make us all a little more human. Is that a bad thing? Hosk watched Okonkwo shake hands with Delegate Sen. The Kalori's 4 eyes were wet with something that looked like tears. Ask me again in 100 years, he said. But right now, watching that human carry the weight of 47 deaths while preparing to defend 8,000 strangers, I think it might be the best thing that has ever happened to this assembly. Riel nodded slowly. They asked his kill count, she murmured, and his silence said everything. Yes, Hosk agreed. It said that humans do not count their kills. They mourn them, and that makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Dangerous? A warrior who feels nothing is predictable. A warrior who feels everything is unstoppable. The humans have learned to feel the weight of death without being paralyzed by it. They have learned to carry grief into battle and turn it into determination. They fight harder because every kill costs them something. He looked at Riel with something like awe. They are not soldiers. They are guardians. And now they are our guardians too. Heaven help anyone who threatens this assembly now. Across the chamber, Okonkwo finally smiled. It was a sad smile, weighted with memory and loss, but it was real. He was surrounded by beings from a dozen worlds, all of them welcoming humanity into their ancient alliance. And somewhere, in whatever came after death, 7 Marines and 1 elderly Telvanni scientist smiled with him. The silence after the question had said everything. And what it said was this: humans carry death so that others may carry life. This is not violence. This is love wearing armor.